Wintry Night by Ruth Bell Graham, illustrated by Richard Jesse Watson. Chapter 4. The Testing Tree. The woman paused briefly and adjusted the cushion near the boy's ankle. Tickled that the cat was curled up on Zeb's chest, she tended the fire and began again. In the very center of the Garden of Eden, God planted a beautiful tree. Prettier than any Christmas tree, its ornaments were a strange and lovely fruit. But this tree was off limits to Adam and Eve, for this was the testing tree. God put it there on purpose, to test and see whether Adam and Eve would obey him. Of course, he could have made humans more like other creatures, which do things without question. A caterpillar does not ask himself, "Let's see, shall I spin myself into a cocoon and turn into a butterfly? Or is it more fun to be a caterpillar?" He just does what he does and cannot do otherwise. God had decided he wouldn't get much pleasure from humans who acted like caterpillars. He wanted people who would obey him and be his children because they chose to. And so, the testing tree. It wasn't a hard test, not like putting a candy bar in front of you and saying you mustn't eat it. After all, there were lots of other trees in the Garden of Eden, plenty of juicy apples and oranges to choose from, and figs, grapes, cherries, plums, better than the best candy bars. God told Adam to help himself to all but that one tree in the middle of the garden. "For if you eat of it," he said, "you will surely die." This is when all the trouble started. One day, a serpent slipped through the bushes and whispered to Eve in a smooth, silky voice. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? "Oh no," Eve replied. "We can eat from most trees, but the fruit that grows on the tree in the middle of the garden is not for us. God told us that if we eat it, we will die." The serpent's forked tongue flicked out and about as he said slyly, "Surely you won't die. God knows when you eat it, you will begin to understand secrets. You will become as wise as he is." "Just take it," the serpent urged. This serpent, as you might already know, was no ordinary snake. It was really a disguise, a costume, for Satan himself. Satan had once been an angel called Son of the Morning, but he was a real troublemaker, and in his pride he had begun to want to be as great and wise as God himself. So Satan fell from heaven, sending shock waves still felt today. Now, seeing Adam and Eve, whom God loved, Satan thought of a way to get even, a way to spoil God's plan. To Eve, the snake's words sounded as exciting. She ran to the center of the garden and looked up into the branches of the testing tree. There, ripe and tempting, hung the fruit. She remembered what Satan said about it making her as wise as God. So she picked one. For a moment she wondered if it would really kill her. She took a tiny bite of it and waited. Nothing happened. She waited some more. Still nothing. Eve felt as strong as ever, and the fruit was so sweet. Quickly she gulped down the rest of it. Then, picking a piece for Adam, she took it to him. Adam ate it. And joy died. Fear came. That doesn't sound too awful, does it? No worse, anyway, than stealing cookies from the cookie jar. But this was the first time anyone on earth had ever disobeyed God, and from that day on, all was ruined. When Adam and Eve failed the test at the testing tree, it may not have been the end of the world. It was, however, the end of the happiness his world had enjoyed. Every horrible thing you can think of, sickness, war, loneliness, thorns, nightmares, got its start the moment Eve disobeyed God. And since God loved his children, he already knew he would come to our rescue. From the beginning of time, we needed Christmas. Meanwhile, God had to deal with Adam and his wife. Now where had they disappeared to? Eden lost. The boy's eyes were solemn as he listened. The cat, no longer curled up, was sprawled out across the boy, sound asleep. "Would you like a cup of hot chocolate?" the woman asked. "No, thank you, ma'am." What happened next? That evening, in the cool of the day, Adam and Eve walked in the garden. "Adam," God called, "where are you?" Adam and Eve looked at each other in terror. Always before they had run to meet him, but now they were shaking. For the first time, they did not want to be near God. They wanted to run away, to put their fingers in their ears and pretend they didn't hear him. So they dashed behind some trees and waited, hoping God would go away. It had been like this all day, waiting, feeling afraid, waiting, feeling guilty, waiting some more. Sure, when they tasted the fruit that morning, nothing had seemed to happen. Yet God's words kept echoing in their minds. "If you eat the fruit, you will die." Perhaps they thought God did not really mean it. After all, we are still alive, aren't we? But when God said they would die, he meant their friendship with him would die. They would want to live without him, and they would die inside. So they did. Adam and Eve started to feel things they had never felt before. Rotten things like fear and anger and shame. Their bodies slowly began to get older. They felt tired, even sick at times, a hint that sooner or later their earthly lives would be no more. And God knew that after this death, there awaited a death that would never end. Adam slowly came out from behind the trees. Trembling, he said to God, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid." "Have you eaten from the tree I told you not to eat?" God asked. Adam replied, "The woman you gave me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." "Eve," God said sternly, "what is it that you and Adam have done?" "The snake did it," Eve protested. "He talked me into it. It was his fault." But God is not impressed by excuses. All three had sinned, which means they had disobeyed him, and all three had to be punished. God turned first to the snake. "You will crawl on your belly and eat dust all the days of your life." Ever since then, as you well know, snakes have slithered along the ground. Turning to Adam and Eve, God said, "Now you will find life hard. You must leave the garden." Then he made coats of skins to clothe them, for they were ashamed. Adam and Eve looked with horror at the skins. They recognized the fur. It had belonged to their animal friends. Darkness fell. Over the garden swept a great storm, low black clouds boiling. The leaves of the testing tree began shaking, and all the other trees bent low in the howling wind. It struck Adam and Eve with such force they ran to keep from falling. So God drove them out of the garden. At the entrance, he placed a tall angel with a flashing sword to block the way back. Outside Eden, life was cold and hard. Instead of simply reaching up into the trees for dinner, Adam and Eve had to plant seeds and pull weeds to raise their own food. Working was exhausting. Thorns and bugs thrived. Rottenness, decay, germs, all these ugly things came as a result of Adam and Eve's sin. The earth and all who lived on it were under a curse. The Garden of Eden had been Adam and Eve's home, but what really made them feel at home was the loving presence of their heavenly Father. God himself had been their true home. Now all was lost. Adam and Eve were the world's first homeless people. The Man Who Listened. "That ain't the end," the boy said hopefully as he smoothed the purring cat. "No," the woman smiled. "It's just the beginning. You see, God was determined to make a way for man to come back home. It happened like this. God still loved these people he had made, for he does not change. no matter how badly Adam and Eve had sinned, they were still his. So, though he drove them from the garden, he continued to watch over them. Many years passed, and God kept watching over Adam and Eve. They had 2 sons, Cain and Abel. When these boys grew up, Cain killed Abel, his only brother. For the first time ever, Adam and Eve saw someone dead, and their own son at that. They wept till there were no tears left, and awoke the next day to weep again. They realized once more what a terrible thing it is to disobey God. Adam and Eve had more children, and those children had children until there were whole cities of people, and most of them acted as badly as Cain. God kept looking for someone who would listen to him and obey, someone to whom he could be a friend. But they didn't listen. Just as the first 2 people forgot about God, so did those who came after them. Instead of living in peace, they fought with each other. The soldier who killed the most people was the greatest hero. And when they weren't fighting, the children of Adam liked noisy pleasures. At their parties, they stuffed themselves, shouted, and drank far into the night. In all the noisy confusion, people did not hear the voice of God speaking to their hearts. No one heard him saying over and over that this was not the way to live, that this was not what he had created them for. God saw how wicked the people had become. Their thoughts were continually evil. It made him very angry. Grieving, he decided to wash mankind from the face of the earth so he could start all over again. In all that wickedness, one man stood out, for he was just and upright, a man who walked with God. His name was Noah. God decided to save Noah and his family from the flood that was coming. He told Noah to build an ark, a huge boat with many rooms inside. And God told him exactly how to build it. It would be big enough to hold Noah's whole family, plus some of every kind of animal and bird in the world. When Noah's neighbors saw him building a huge boat on dry land, many miles from the ocean, they laughed until their sides hurt and tears rolled down their cheeks. But Noah didn't care what people thought. He wanted only to obey God. After the last board was pegged in place, Noah and his 3 sons led the animals into the ark. His wife and his sons' wives carried in the food: seed for the birds, grain for the cattle and horses, dried fruit for themselves, enough to last for a long, long time. As Noah and his family and the animals waited inside the ark, Noah's neighbors laughed louder than ever. While they were laughing, the rain began to fall. Through the downpour, those in the ark heard a strange sound. The laughter had turned to wailing. Then the air was pierced by screams. Fists pounded on the outside of the ark. Noah and his family could do nothing, for God had shut them in. Soon the pounding stopped. Cries grew fewer, and then there was only the steady pouring of rain. Day and night the raging storm continued. In the flickering light of their oil lamps inside the ark, Noah's family sat and listened to the rain pounding on the roof. After many days they felt the ark gently rocking, and they knew it was floating on the water. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. When at last it stopped, Noah opened the window to look out. There was nothing but water, stretching as far as his eyes could see. Not even the mountain peaks showed. Several weeks passed while they floated on. The animals wished they could get out and run. The deer paced back and forth in their stalls. The ark began to smell as bad as a dirty barn on a hot August day. Noah and his family wondered if they would ever see dry land again. Then one day Noah opened the window and lifted out a dove. The dove eagerly took to the skies. It flapped its wings and soared above the water until it was out of sight. Several hours later the dove returned, holding an olive leaf in its beak. That made all the animals in the ark very happy, because they knew the water must finally be going down. A whole year went by before the earth was dry enough to walk on. Then out of the ark they all tumbled, Noah and his family and all the animals. The cows kicked up their hooves and bounded across the hills as though spring had come after a long winter. Noah's family was so glad to get out of the crowded ark they wanted to run and jump and turn cartwheels. But before he did anything else, Noah built an altar and offered a solemn prayer of thanks to God. God promised Noah and his family that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood, and he placed a rainbow in the sky as a sign that he would never forget his promise. At first the people didn't forget either. Noah's sons remembered God and the great flood he had sent. They told their own sons and daughters about it, and the sons and daughters told their children. But it was starting to seem like a story from long, long ago. People could no longer recall exactly why Noah and his family were rescued from the flood. They forgot how important it was to listen to God. God intended for everyone to live together in peace. But people began once again to stray from his plan. If a man was strong, he would take all the wheat from his neighbor's fields and all the fruit from his trees and lock them up in his own storehouses. The strongest and richest declared themselves rulers, making whole cities their slaves. They invented many fake gods, a god to help them win wars, a god to make it rain, a god to chase wolves away. They even tried to imagine what these gods looked like. They carved them out of wood, stone, even metal. Watching the people, God saw they were getting more confused all the time. There is only one God, he kept trying to tell them. It was no use. They didn't hear him. Most people had ignored God for so long they didn't even recognize his voice. God thought of another plan to rescue his people, a plan that would one day lead to that first Christmas in Bethlehem. To make the plan work, God needed someone who was still faithful to him, and he knew just where to find him.